Welcome to Founders Future, a podcast powered by Closers.io, where we explore the journeys of innovative entrepreneurs and the road ahead for them and their companies. I'm your host, Milan Kohut, and in each episode, we uncover the stories behind impactful ventures, the challenges faced, the lessons learned, and the strategies fueling future growth. Today, I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by Anna Lundberg, a strategist and mentor for quietly driven founders and independent experts building profitable, sustainable businesses through her company One Step Outside. She studied philosophy, politics, and economics at Oxford, earned a postgraduate degree in international relations in Geneva, and spent 10 years in FMCG marketing at Procter Gamble. Over the past 12 years, she has coached hundreds of consultants, coaches, and service-based owners, generated over 40,000 podcast downloads, and authored books on escaping the 9-to-5 and the 5 pillars of successful businesses. With that being said, Anna, let me officially welcome you to Founders Future.
Thanks so much, Milan. Really excited to talk to you. The idea of looking at the future and making that impact is so powerful and so inspiring. So can't wait to get stuck in.
I love the energy. Awesome. We're going to dive right into the conversation. What I love to do with all of my guests is take it back in time. Before you even had this company, what were you doing before? And then eventually, what was the motivation for starting the business?
Yeah, so going right back, as you mentioned there in the intro, I studied something completely different. I don't know how your experience has been, but in the UK, we tend to study one thing and end up doing something completely different. So I ended up in marketing, which turned out to be, of course, the best school for me, but it was always a bit disconnected to what I wanted to do. So I always felt, oh, this isn't quite right. So I quit my job in 2013. Very daring on me thing to do because I had no plan of what to do. And to be perfectly honest, I wasn't particularly intentional with what I've built. So we can talk about the choices I made later, but at the time, it was just a bit of a perfect storm that I had done 7, 8 years in a particular organization. I didn't see the next role. So obviously I was in digital marketing and that felt like a big opportunity. And on a personal level, I had people around me settling down, having kids, and that wasn't me either. So it was more a personal decision to work for myself. And then there've been lots of twists and turns along the way since then.
A lot of adjustments, 100%.
Yes.
But you know what? It's quite common. We spend all those years studying one thing and then being like, oh, actually, this is not for me. But it takes a lot to actually be that brave and be like, okay, let me try something else. Change is scary, always. So I completely get that. Now, Anna, let's talk about where this journey got you overall and what the business looks like today. In this part of the podcast, what I'm trying to do is get the listeners close to, first of all, who it is exactly that you're trying to help right now, but also what are the core offerings that you have in place for your clients? So tell us all about that.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So there's been some evolution. I guess just to tie it back to that moment we talked about there, when I started, in fact, when I started, it was consulting. So I've tried all sorts of different business models over the years, but it was really consulting. And then I quit that and discovered coaching. And it happened very organically that because I had quit my corporate job and started my own business, people came to me asking how I do it. So that became the foundation of my coaching, my mentoring. I developed an academy course program that was self-paced. I had an incubator and an accelerator. And I was also doing corporate workshops and training. As you can imagine, it was quite complex, all those different things, doing all the right things, but spread pretty thin. So at the time, the target was very much the first few months or year or so of people starting a business. But of course, I've matured in my business and I've been doing this for over 10 years and people who followed me have matured. And I've realized since then that really there's another moment or multiple moments that happen when you outgrow the model that you're in. So I'm not so interested anymore in, oh, how do I get started? How do I build a website? That kind of stuff. In a way, that's the easy part. The other bit is when you've built a kind of reactive Frankenstein model with so many offers and so many funnels and all sorts of things, and you go, hang on a second, either it's not working at all or it's working on paper, but it feels so stressful. I'm working way longer than I want to be working. Is this success? Because if it is, I don't think I want it. So it's that recalibration moment that can come from, I work with someone who turned 50 and they suddenly go, hang on a second, I'm halfway through my life was the way they put it. It could be two co-founders having an argument. It could be that you just realize I'm on my way to burnout if I keep going like this. So it's having that moment of reevaluating. So I've massively simplified everything. I do one-to-one mentoring with individual founders and come in and do coaching for their team as well, for their leadership team. But in particular, I work with solopreneurs. That's really my sweet spot. It may still mean having a bit of a team. We can use that term quite loosely, but it's someone who's building a business around their life rather than their, and I know we talk about scaling and growth, but it's not scale and growth for the sake of it. We're not looking at VC investment and that kind of thing. It's really a business that gives us enough to live. So we have both the ambition, wanting to have the income and to do amazing work, and not wanting to burn out, wanting to be able to travel, wanting to be able to do exercise and see the kids or whatever life looks like for you.
Absolutely. Like you said yourself, it's quite easy to get started with something, but once you're at that stage, to really put yourself in a position of growth and scaling further, there's several pillars that you need to have in place that would allow you to do so eventually. So you're basically saying that you completely pivoted. You're not working with people who are just starting. You're just looking to work with people who already launched their offers and they're just looking for the next steps, right?
To some extent, it sounds like a dramatic pivot in a way, but it's really been an organic evolution. It just happened that those are the problems I'm solving now. So I've started sharing different, more advanced problems and solutions on my podcast. It's just different level of conversation. So I still have things I can give to people starting out, but I don't think that's the value where I can add the most. And I think there's a much more sophisticated level, and I can add so much more when someone already has that stuff. But I can go, no, hang on a second. But you're attracting all these clients, but are they the clients you want to be working with? How can we set a better filter to qualify those leads? How can we set better boundaries? Okay, you're working because you thought, oh my God, I need as much money as possible. I've got to work all the time and I should do this. But now you're earning the 20K a month or whatever. You no longer need to push yourself that much. And actually, you'd happily take a bit less money, but have a bit more time for the family, whatever. So I feel like there's a little shift there in your mindset or in the way you show up or boundary you set can change so much. So that's what I find exciting now. And also, it's such a shame to be creating a business for freedom and then becoming your world's worst boss and actually trapping yourself in something
Yeah.
that's worse than what you left in the first place.
Yeah, there's so many people who actually become slaves of their own businesses. It's quite a common. But so when it comes to the offer that you have in place, would you say that the majority of things that you do are on the basis of one-on-ones, or is there also like a group setting option to what you do?
Yeah, so as I said, I'm just shifting now. So as this goes out, basically, I'm opening up my new program. So I had my accelerator, which was really the core program, and it was attracting a lot of beginners. So a few more advanced, but mainly beginners. And that was a year-long program. And I just feel in this, I don't know what's happened in the world, but it just feels very heavy, both for me and for them to do a whole year-long program. And there's this shift of focusing on more intentional business model redesign. And so it's a 12-week program now. So I've got this program called The Architect. It's all built on my Solopreneur operating system. And it's the same pillars, the foundational principles are still there. So for me, it's very much an evolution, but it's just so much more robust and clear and structured. And thanks to me having been working on this for 10 plus years, it's no longer just, oh, I think maybe we should do this. No, guys, this really works. I know that these are the pillars you need in place and let's get them done. Then there's a really interesting piece on actually implementing it. That's why I always like working with people for longer, because we all know we can do a course or go to a big rah-rah weekend retreat or whatever, and then come back and go back to exactly what we were doing before. So there's a big piece for me around how can I help people actually, an alumni program, how can I help them keep implementing and sustaining the design, the new habits that we've come up with, actually anchoring that in our life and not just having it as a pretty piece of paper sitting by our computer that we completely ignore and go back to the same things we were doing before.
Absolutely. And if you would allow me, I also want to dig a little bit deeper into what is actually going on the inside. Some of the listeners maybe are not that familiar with your project. So when it comes to the client and their journey, obviously there is a certain amount of time that you need to work with your client to really make sure that you set them up for success. But what are those different stages? What is happening on the inside? What is the frequency of working with you? Just tell us more about it.
Yeah, sure. I suppose, first of all, the framework, there are three pillars now. So we talked about the five pillars and they're very much there. But really, when it comes to the business piece of it, the Solopreneur operating system, it's intentional design of the business model or redesign in some cases. It's creating the demand. So that's where the marketing and sales comes in a way that feels authentic and aligned. And then it's the delivery, making it work around your life. So those are the three sort of anchors that we work on, whether it's one-to-one or if it's group. And then in terms of, let's take the Architect then program, it's a fortnightly call. There's content to go through, but then it's really about us meeting and making sure, again, we're anchoring that in what they're doing. So there's some thought-provoking stuff, there's exercises, there's coaching, and supported now, of course, thanks to the wonders of AI with some fancy things in the background to support as well. One-to-one, of course, as you can imagine, can be anything you want to, but this is really trying to get squeeze out as much juice, I guess, get the insights in a relatively short time frame so that you can come away with, wow, I really know exactly what I want to be doing and have that roadmap for the next stage of your business.
Absolutely. Now, marketing and sales is, a big part of what you do and talk about when it comes to your clients, but also this includes a specific set of questions that you also need to ask yourself on a day-to-day basis as a business owner. If that's okay, let's touch on the back end side of the business for a second, and more specifically, what is it that you do on the front of marketing and lead generation for yourself to make
Mhm.
all of this happen?
Yeah, so I come from a marketing background, so it seems quite obvious that it should be natural, and to some extent it always has been. And so I was very familiar with brand frameworks, and I translated that into a personal brand framework. And I also, my specialism was content strategy, digital content strategy. So that was always my go-to. And over the years, I've got the podcast, I've got books, I do LinkedIn videos, all sorts. There's all the stuff is out there, and that's always been my natural go-to is inbound content creation. And then, to be honest, with the type of business I run, it's very kind of high value, high touch, low volume. So I don't need hundreds of thousands of leads coming through. So combined with the content that I put out to the inbound, plus of course word of mouth and referrals and so on, that's been a pretty good amount for me. Over the last few years, I have started doing more outbound. And of course, as a marketer, I suddenly realized that, oh, sales is a bit different to marketing, especially now as the tectonic plates have shifted in the marketplace. I think it's no longer enough just to put a video out, put a post out. If I did that 10 years ago, I'd have clients. Now that's simply not the case. LinkedIn is so flooded now, especially with all the AI and so on. It's just so much harder to stand out. And I find actually the relationships and having real conversations with people is so important. So for me, there's a much more intentional piece, making sure I'm reaching out, following up. There's a much more robust sales system, I guess you would call it, in place, which I would have hesitated to talk about or even attempt 5, 6 years ago.
Yeah, you just reminded me of a conversation that I had last week, actually, with somebody else. And we're just talking about the fact I'm coming from marketing background myself. That's what I did pretty much the last decade. And we are just talking about the fact that what you could do 8 years, 10 years back, that was enough. We had it easy though.
Mhm.
Like we really did have it
So
easy.
easy.
But it's evolving now constantly. There's new trends every single month, every single week. You really have to find the adaptability, right, behind what you do that needs to be there. So when it comes to everything that you've mentioned is on the side of organic, right? When we talk about organic reach, leads coming from these sources, but also word of mouth referrals, this is the best kind of lead that you could possibly get.
Mm.
But at the same time, these tend to be very inconsistent, right? Especially compared to paid advertisement. So I'm curious, is this somehow a part of what you do, or is it going to become a part of your marketing plans in the future?
It was actually, to be honest. I ran back in the day, it was Facebook. Facebook was a huge platform for me. I had a Facebook group and I'd run 5-day challenges, and that would bring a lot of the clients in. Running paid ads, absolutely. LinkedIn obviously is bringing in pay to play now. So that's something to be experimenting with, although there's a bit of resistance as well. It's a shame because, as we said, it's been such a nice organic place where you could really have good conversations and people would be coming to you. I think absolutely, as even for people who aren't huge and who don't have huge budgets, having a combination. We always talked about paid, owned, and earned media back in my marketing days, but having that is a great way to make sure, especially with the algorithms now, to make sure that people are seeing your things. I've personally gone in a way that's a bit less scalable. I've started doing more in-person things and workshops. So for me, it's always been, if you met Daniel Priestley, for example, is the master of this right now. He's so successful, 7, 8 businesses, whatever it is, and he still runs free workshops every week. And for me, that works really well. I should probably run way more given the pace he's able to sustain. But really, even once a month, doing a free or a low cost workshop, for me, that's the best way for people to see me in action. As you said, with the inbound, the quality of leads there, someone who's listened to my podcast, who's gone to my workshops, they just get it. They know that we're aligned. They've learned things already from me. I'm not good at converting cold people. So going, hey, Milan, this is me, buy from me. I'm sure you could train me. I'm sure there's training I could do, but that is just not naturally how I excel. And I find when it's warm, when it's a referral, when someone's come through the inbound, the organic route, it's the close rate is close to 100% because it's just they're already sold before I even talk to them. And that's my preferred way. But of course, as you said, then scaling is an interesting conversation to see how can you get more eyeballs, more people in at the top so that you can also be more choosy about who you do work with and say no to the ones that aren't aligned.
Exactly. It's a great way to grow faster because at the end of the day, we're talking about the ability to show up to the right person at the right time.
Yeah.
Making sure that the offer is actually cold traffic friendly, that might be the key. But you also mentioned that in the past couple of years, you did a lot more outbound, which also begs the question, are you planning on launching your own teams within the company, like for marketing, sales, other departments, just to have something more scalable in play, or what is your perspective on that?
Yeah, to be honest, I've got a small team and I've had people do different things over the years. Obviously I've got podcast editor and accountant and an assistant and so on. I went through a phase of someone having access to my LinkedIn and so on. I just didn't love it. Partly now they're clamping down on automation and so on. Just my Instagram got hacked, so then I got very careful about someone else having my details and so on. Partly also because again, with my kind of high value, high trust, lower volume, for me, it is so much about the relationships and so on. Now, obviously, there are certain things, and the more I can standardize the path of, okay, solopreneur operating system workshop, and then come into the architect, and then there's a really clear path. Then it's rinse and repeat, running the same workshop, the same messaging, the same qualifying questions, then it's much easier to hand that over to somebody. But for now, at least, I think, to be honest, I also enjoy that part of having the conversations with people. You
Hmm.
learn so much, and it is a really genuine, for me, it is a genuine conversation. It's not, I'm sure you get this with your podcast. I get 10 pitches a day. Some of them don't even call me by the correct name and the right podcast title, but others, they're just automation. And when you get that wrong, it really harms your business so much more than it helps. So having, as I know you focus on, having well-trained people within your team who you trust who are following a process that works for you is very appealing. But there are so many things that could go wrong along the way when you get it wrong.
Yeah, sure. And also, to be honest, like as long as you have the capacity to actually talk to people, you should. That's the best thing that you can do.
Well,
And
in a way,
also,
it's the
yeah,
most important thing for the CEO to do, right? The business
it is.
development traditionally, and again, looking at Daniel Priestley, that's what he does. He isn't actually coaching and training on the back end. The difference for me as a solo, as I'm doing all the things, I'm also the one who's delivering. Now, I could have a model where I decided to have associate experts who worked under me and taught my frameworks. That's not my model for now, but that could be more scalable. But ultimately, they're choosing to work with me. To give an example, years ago, I worked with someone who's since become hugely successful, and she would, even at the early stage, she would have an assistant that you would talk to before you got onto a call with her. And what I liked about that is it filters, they ask you the questions. So again, like the examples I said, they're already bought in. They understand the different programs, the options, the pricing, and then it's really just going, okay, have a chat and let's get you in. So there are ways of keeping that kind of high touch, high trust without losing what makes you so attractive to the client and what makes you successful, but still having more of a process. When I first, so I tell the story years ago, I went viral because Ariana Huffington shared an article I wrote, and I had 1,000 people book calls with me. And as you can imagine, hardly anyone showed up. Most of them were freebie hunters and not in any way qualified. So one of my early lessons was even just to have a form on my sign up page, asking a couple of
Absolutely.
questions. It's absurd, right? But just having access to your calendar, as a lot of people do, was just such a waste of time. So I think out of those hundreds of calls, not a single one converted. So that was a painful lesson at the time. But even just a bit of a qualification, a bit more of a standardized process has helped so much to get the right people in.
That application for that's a bare minimum.
It's
That's a
like, yeah,
must have.
101 for
Yeah.
calls, isn't it? I know, I learned that the hard way.
Yeah. But also, I would 100% agree with what you said. Having somebody like an SDR or appointments that are just helping out
Mm,
with prospecting, because this goes back to you really focusing on the highest revenue generating
mm,
activities, which is actually spending time on calls, closing deals.
yeah.
Easy as that. So now also, Anna, I would love to get your perspective on here's the thing. Delegation has is really becoming like one of the biggest topics on the podcast. There is a lot of
Mhm.
people having a really hard time with this. And knowing that you're already in a position where you hired several people, try different positions, what is your philosophy on this? When is the right timing to actually take the next step towards hiring somebody? Just share your perspective on that.
So I just ran a workshop today, and there are a couple of founders who have been really successful, and yet they're still anchored in the, oh, I've got to do everything myself. I can't afford to hand this out. What if I don't make enough money and so on? So that's such a limitation, even when the revenue is there. And I definitely say sooner rather than later. Again, when I started, it was someone on Fiverr, it was Upwork. It's not like you're hiring a full-time employee. You can outsource a one-off project, you can test. Obviously, there are lots of VA platforms now and so on. There are so many models to try. Again, one of my painful lessons early on was when I first handed over all my admin stuff to somebody, my week was empty. And that meant basically I'd been spending my week just scheduling blog posts and newsletters and stuff. No revenue generating stuff there at all, and I felt busy, and check me out, I'm a really successful founder. But of course I wasn't getting the results because all I was doing was low level admin stuff that any assistant could do. So that was a key learning. And one of the tables, and there's different versions of this that I always share with people, is do a column of the things I have to do because I'm the CEO, I'm the coach, I'm the expert, the things I want to do because that's what I love about the business. But then you've got the two columns of things someone else could do faster, cheaper, better, and the things that actually nobody needs to do. I had a client who was paying someone to do something on the website that he said, you know what, that doesn't even need doing. And so he was paying someone to do something that really should have been deleted. And I think that's such a useful exercise to go through regularly, really, because if I'm sitting here trying to tweak some coding on my website, yes, ChatGPT can help me a bit now. If I'm spending hours on that, whereas I could have given that to somebody who would fix it for $50, then of course that's worth it when I could be earning 5K on a workshop or something. So it's just thinking of the investment cost, the opportunity cost of doing one thing and not the other. And yeah, that balance of where you're focusing your time.
Yeah, I would say everybody listening to this podcast right now, just rewind it 2 minutes back and listen again. This was very straightforward, but I 100% agreed here. We just love to keep ourselves busy.
Do it right. And it's
Yeah.
very scary not to be doing stuff. But that's when you go, hang on, in that silence is what is going to really move the needle here.
Mhm.
We resist sometimes even having the numbers and things. But again, I walked people through today just, okay, you want 50 clients. That means you need to have this many conversations. And some people aren't even looking at that. And it's easy to put your head in the sand. It's like, oh, look at me, I'm so busy. I've got LinkedIn and that post went viral and that's great. But yes, but is that bringing in clients? Because if not, then, unfortunately, that's where you end up working evenings and weekends and so on because you're spending lots of time working on the wrong things.
Yeah, this is basically about reverse engineering the goals
Mm.
that you want to hit. And I gotta say one thing, for a lot of people, this is unachievable solely because of one fact. We hate to take ownership. And you know that once you start working with the metrics, once you start working with the data, it becomes quite clear. But if it is clear, you just have a different sort of mindset or a different perspective of, yeah, it's actually doable, I can achieve it, but it's going to take a lot of work. And then we're like, oh no, it can be scary
Yeah.
again. And it's all about
Yeah.
ownership. But yeah,
I love that word ownership, and it's exactly that. And ironically, it's exactly why, again, a lot of people I work with, we do this for the freedom and the autonomy and to take charge and have that agency. And yet, it's so easy to go, oh, it's the algorithm, no one's seeing my posts, and oh, the
oh
market's
yeah,
really tough right now. Yes, but have you actually pick up your, we say put your big girl pants on, but it's pick up I say pick up the phone, I never pick up the phone, but sort of metaphor of it. Okay, follow up with that client who said they were interested and you haven't heard from them, give them a nudge, post a thing, say, hey, I've got these spots. That's the only way that you're going to get out of that funk. If you just sit there lamenting the world, yes, we can cry about it, but actually, ultimately, we have to take ownership of it. And if we can look at those numbers black on white, we can go, okay, it's just a numbers game. In a way, I hate that because it is so much about the human relationship, but it is still about the numbers. If you're not having conversations, it doesn't matter how human you're being. It's just not enough people. Just the maths won't maths. Yeah, I think
exactly.
we need to pull our big pants on and take ownership. Absolutely. And that's so exciting, right? Scary and exciting, but it's incredibly empowering. And it means I have my destiny in my hands rather than I'm completely a slave to, again, the algorithm or what the tech bros are doing or whatever. I can actually now go out and do something about it.
Agreed. Again.
Good.
And let's talk about the future of the company. Obviously, you're building something great. I love the project. I love the offer. What is going to happen in the next 12 months? What are the biggest goals, targets, revenue, milestones that you have set for yourself?
Yeah, so for everything I say, I've kept things quite intentionally small. It's been intentional constraint because initially I was traveling and being very nomadic and hippie, as I call it. And then now I've had young children and not been sleeping a lot. And so I've very intentionally kept it small. And I had a bit of an existential crisis a couple of years ago when I was 10 years in. And it's those things, oh, I should be further along. And should I still do the same thing? Should I rip it all up and start again? And I went through a lot of soul searching, thinking about it and so on. And as I said, coming out, it's not that different, but I feel so much of a different energy. And my ambitions have increased. So I'm really curious now about how much can I make to some extent to prove to people as well that you can build this kind of business, a lifestyle business around your life without doing the 996 that's so sexy these days. We can actually do it within, in my case, term time, school hours, without burning out. I can work with people I enjoy working with. It's a bit of an experiment to go more ambitious than I was before. And it's hard to put an exact number on that, but I'm curious
Hmm.
rather to push the ceiling to see, okay, how can I calibrate? Okay, I'm putting more effort in here and getting more results. Well, that's a bit too much because now, oh, I'm not sleeping. How can I get that right? And I think there's a level of enoughness to those goals. Sometimes we just like more. Okay, and I hate to say Elon Musk, trillionaire, whatever, like how much is enough? And I know it's probably not about the money. And of course, it's very exciting to be the richest man on earth. There's a moment when you go, hang on a second, is that worth the 100 and whatever hour weeks and the toxic work culture and the 7 divorces, whatever it is you're going through? I make different choices. And yes, there is a minimum of what we want to be earning, but there might also be a maximum or like an enoughness that will still be as
Definitely.
happy.
Definitely. But one thing that I love about what you just said is basically you made a very clear distinction between what it is now and what you want to create and what you want to try
Mm,
and test out. So when you think about changing a couple of things within the business now to make this all possible,
mm.
what would you say is going to become the biggest challenge to make it happen?
So I think it's a bit of a fear of success, which is a bit absurd. But I think as I said, I've held myself back thinking, oh, but if it's too successful, which is an absurd thing to worry about because that's a good problem to have, right? Then it means I'll have to travel lots and I'll get really stressed and that will overflow into my and so on. And that's quite an interesting one. So I think, and I spoke to someone about this the last few days as well, that the classic cliche, if you shoot for the stars, you might end up in the treetops, if you've heard that. But if you shoot for the treetops, maybe you'll only end up in the trunk, right? So you play too small, thinking you're protecting yourself, but what you're doing is just making things harder for yourself. Whereas actually, if you play a bit bigger, you'll get more people, and that means, as I said before, you can be more choosy around, I'm not going to work with you because, or I'm going to raise my price over here because the demand is there. So it's just been a bit of a mindset shift for me. Yes, I'm super protective and intentional about how I design and work, but maybe I need to think bigger, act bigger, play bigger in order to then be able to have that true freedom that I want. Because freedom is I can just lie around and sunbathe all day, but that's going to run out soon when the money runs out, right? So true freedom is when you have the financial freedom as well. And that does require hard work and that demand and so on. So for me, it's myself, I think, holding myself back. It's my own intentional limitation, which now I'm very much working on unpicking and, yeah, like I said, playing bigger.
Yeah, I love this. And also, I gotta say one thing, when it comes to putting yourself in a position where all of the operations and processes are allowing you to scale and grow the company, this is the kind of freedom that a lot of people dream about
Mm,
when they start a business like this, right? Because if the system allows you to do, then you can have complete control over what's coming in every single
mm,
month, what's going out. That's the kind of freedom that you need to have. And not really always be worried about if I'm gonna make it, if I'm gonna keep it afloat. Or
mm.
on the other hand, is the
Yeah.
business going to hold it? Because I just didn't build the right fundamentals, I would
Yeah, and
say.
unfortunately, we're always chasing. Generally, we chase scale, we chase the funding, the next round, it's about the exit. And then most people want to just go and do another business anyway, right? Because why would you want to exit why would I want to exit the thing that I love doing? For me, that
Yep.
seems a bit crazy. So it's more about bringing in that freedom earlier on rather than postponing it and thinking, oh my gosh, I've got to do this 996 for the next 10 years to maybe sell my business for millions, to maybe then have a 5 year period of still having to work really hard. And then by then you're old and grey, tired. So for me, it's, yeah, about trying to build that freedom in, but still, as you said, being obviously commercially savvy and making sure that we're looking at the numbers and making it commercially viable, as well as having that lovely cocktail on the beach kind of vibe that was so
The
popular in the early
lifestyle
days.
that comes with
Yeah,
it.
the Tim Ferriss 4 hour weeks. I think the 4 hour week is a bit crazy, and he, of course, never did that. But I began to toy with the 4 hour day, which I think is more feasible. A lot of studies say, anyway, that we only get 3 or 4 hours of proper work done a day.
True.
True. And yet, this whole push towards working longer and longer hours is a bit crazy. So I'm, again, a bit experimenting with, okay, how can I make sure those 4 or 5 hours really move the needle? So that I can then enjoy obviously the time outside. And again, with school, those are basically the core hours that the kids are at school. So for some of us, it's an obligation, unless we want to outsource childcare to wrap around nannies and that kind of thing, which is a choice. If you don't want to do that, actually, you have a little window, and then, damn it, we've got to really make the most of that time and build that empire if that's what we want to do within those windows.
Yeah. And this has been an incredible conversation. I feel like we could definitely dive deeper into everything, but I want to say thank you for taking the time today, sharing the story with me and the audience. And if anybody from the listeners would like to reach out, get in touch with you, maybe even work with you one day, what is the best way to go about that?
Everything I've been talking about now, the Solopreneur operating system, the architect, that's living at intentionalexpert.com. So if you go to intentionalexpert.com, then you can learn all about that. There's a wait list, so that's exciting. Yeah, and of course I've got my own podcast, Reimagining Success, where this is all we talk about in terms of, okay, what does success really mean? How can I both pursue my ambitions and also have that life balance, whether it's with a chronic health condition or neurodivergence or young family or just wanting to travel the world, and whatever your desires. It's about finding a meaningful definition of success and then pursuing it, building differently.
Beautiful. Awesome. To our listeners, if today's conversation inspired you as well, make sure to subscribe to Founders Future on your favorite platform. And also, if you're a business owner, more specifically a consultant or a coach, or you have an agency and you're trying to scale the business and really enhance both your sales and marketing efforts, also visit closers.io. Get in touch with our team and discover how exactly we scaled our company from 0 to over 30 million per year in less than 3 years. Until then, keep on crushing it, and I'll see you on the next one.